This is a review video for Comp 350 for the unit on post-colonial media theory. In this unit, we looked at what is post-colonialism and how media theorists have been influenced by this perspective. Post-colonialism was defined as a theoretical approach concerned with human consequences of the control and exploitation of colonized people and their lands. In other words, it's the study emerging from a time period in history when Western powers were withdrawing from developing countries which they had controlled, and the impact that that had on different groups' identities and perspectives, both internally and externally. Through this work, we see that race is defined not just in biological terms, but is often defined by outsiders and ethnic groups as marginalized others. Race, it is argued, is a construction as well as biological. And ethnicity is described as an imagined community that is often put together or represented in an ideological way. Post-colonial studies seeks to unpack these assumptions on which beliefs about race and ethnicity are based and the dominant representations used in society to picture them. Key issues include how post-colonial and Orientalist narratives in the past frame images of race even in our contemporary time. Also, the ways modern racial identity is negotiated through the media as a monolithic claim rather than seen as a hybridity. We see the issues of postmodernism, which we'll talk about later, and globalization impact views of race and ethnicity in contemporary society. Scholars of media that use this approach are often coming from a cultural studies perspective or media effects. Scholars here study the role media plays in shaping and reflecting popular presentations and beliefs about race and ethnicity. Media studies scholars study a number of key issues, including the images, words, and values that shape specific portrayals of race and ethnicity through media, such as in media narratives and storylines and characters created. We heard from how Stuart Hall critiqued the idea of black popular culture as a monolithic space, and he described it as a contradictory space. In other words, media scholars need to look at the different kinds of ethnicities as well as cultural identities that are used in bringing together a representation of blackness in contemporary culture. And it argues that it's much more nuanced than it often is presented by the media. We also looked at the work of Edward Said, who brought us the concept of Orientalism. He argued that the basis of many of our fictions and generalizations about race, especially related to Asia and the Middle East, are often used to frame and communicate our even contemporary understandings of race and ethnicity. He argues that historic stereotypes are still being circulated today and create otherness or an objectification of